Delighted now to be joined by Jonathan Higgins of Galway FM to look back at the Connacht Club finals for all three Galway teams who brought Connacht titles back to Galway, which included victories for Moycullen, Dunmore MacHales and Clifden, all winning Connacht titles in the senior, intermediate and junior, and now progress on to the All-Ireland semi-finals. So I'm sure there's great excitement and great celebrations in those parishes. Over the weekend. Jonathan, I presume obviously like a lot of Galway football man, and the work you're doing for Galway FM, you've been following each club's journey very closely. But I think we can all say now, like, given the year the Galway senior footballers had, and then you consider Clifton, Dunmore MacHales and Mike Cullen winning over the weekend, like it's safe to say Galway football is really on the crest of a wave.
Oh, absolutely. And look, it was a breakout kind of renaissance year in terms of the intercounty setup with Porrick and the Galway senior team. They brought us on one hell of a journey, but it's been all the way back since the start of the year. And it almost is gone the full year. You're back to winning the FBD League. You're back to NUIG winning the Sigerson. You're back to a good good National Football League for Galway, getting promoted. Okay, fair enough. Didn't get the final, but I think the reality is it didn't really give a twat about that. Connacht Championship beating Mayo, going all the way through the highs of that marvellous run. Like, we'll look back, I think, on that Armagh game for quite some time. The Derry victory, a little bit unfortunate, the All Ireland final, but even still, it was a great journey. It was a great game. It wasn't as left. We left empty-handed. I think the performance was wonderful, and the performance of Shane Walsh and many others on the day was fantastic, and it was so unlucky. And that has just kind of juggernauted on to, I suppose, the minor success as well, winning the All-Ireland. And it's, flipped on to just a wonderful, wonderful club championship here across the grades, and that's been reflected now by pretty much a big maroon and white arm wrestle over the course of the year. Like, you look back on Galway, and like, you're probably looking at maybe the under-20s was the only little bit of a blip, but any of us that was that stupid and unfortunate to be down in Bacon that night for that defeat against Mayo, it was a game that probably should never have taken place. I think that and the Sigerson final down in Carlow, where I think are two games and two nights that I'm still struggling to warm up again. They were both equally as bad. But that's really been the only blip. Everything aside from that, it's been almost been a whirlwind year. And as I said, wonderful championship. And now teams that are, for me, the most pleasing thing, that they're not just happy to win their respective Galway titles. They just want to seem to go on one more and go on the journey. And they all have just taken it in their stride. And I know from speaking to, people up and down the country, and not from Galway, they're all kind of looking on with envy. They were with the championship, and I think, for me, the Moycullen victory over Westport just showed the gulf in class between, say, Galway and Mayo football at the time. But yeah, and they've taken it in their stride, and things are in a good way now. And also, if you want to go, if you want to keep the optimism bubble going, I was at the minor final on Saturday evening in Duggan Park. What a game of football that was. An enthralling county final, and a huge array of talent right down between the both sides. Two excellently coached footballing sides. The future is very much bright for Galway football, and now the present is very bright as well. 3 Connacht titles, unthinkable really. I know it was done in 2005. It's hard to think that relatively recent, but it's no mean achievement. And you got to fancy the 3 respective teams. They'll be all eyeing, it's not quite Paddy's Day glory anymore, but they'll be looking for glory the last couple of weeks of January. And you just, as Galway football, and yourself, Paul, I'm sure, watching so much games, you just got to be so positive and such a, you get excited when you're talking about Galway football again.
Just before we do talk about, I suppose, what those 3 victories mean for Galway football and what it means for those teams, you did mention the minor final there, and it's something I actually want to touch on. Probably wouldn't have touched much on the minor championship on the podcast, but for me, like, it was such a standout result, because I think anyone who has seen that Galway minor team, you see 5 or 6 Galway minors from Clare Galway, you instantly think Clare Galway close to that. And like their seniors, like that game on Saturday when Moycullen and Beclair go away after extra time, like I'm sure that like even when the seniors were looking on, a couple of them were up there, like it definitely gave them a bit of motivation or something, because like that was a real surprise result, Moycullen beating that Galway team.
Yeah, I think like hands up, I haven't seen a lot of club final or minor football final over the course of the year between one thing and another. I did see the Clare Galway having a relatively impressive enough victory over Mary in the semi-final. And, you got to just look at the quality, like, right down the spine of that team, Fardy, Travers, Longergan, Inamana and Morgan up at full forward. They're Galway names. They're going to be Galway names for the next couple of years and many years to come as well. It's a really, really talented squad, very well drilled squad. Excellent victories, as I said, over Mary in difficult enough conditions. They made light work of it in the end. But, you have to say with Moycullen, the one thing that I would say is, well, I suppose two real things that really struck out in mind. One, an exceptionally well coached team, very, very similar to the senior setup in terms of their style in football, and the extreme tactically discipline. You can very much see a one club mantra in there. I know there's some overlap between some of the senior management and some of the minor setup as well, and you can see that as well. Very, very well drilled. And then the other thing really was the fact that there was so many. This is a day before the Connacht final. It's a long enough trip from Moycullen across to Ballinsloe on a cold enough, miserable enough Saturday afternoon. There was such an array of the senior setup there, and I met Don Connellan there. I met so many of the senior players there as well, and for me that's great. And even I pulled into Duggan Park before, and you see the likes of Tom Clark and Owen Gallagher. And the only reason I'm just pulling those out is because it's often the thing that's thrown at them, blow-ins, etc. But they've totally embedded themselves there in the club, and to see them there supporting the team and everyone together. And then there's the flip side on Sunday. Moycullen football is in a right good spot. They're a club that's absolutely thriving. They're doing so much well on the pitch, but so much well off the pitch now as well. And that's the biggest compliment you can tell. Everyone's pulling together, and they're just like, it's if you kind of didn't look at the birth certs or whatever, you maybe wouldn't notice the difference between the two sides, because they play such a similar style of football. And in a trawl and final, hard luck to Clare Galway. They'll certainly be involved in more, and another club that's very much on the up. We'll see many of those players playing for both Clare Galway and Galway in the years to come. But again, Galway football is in a great spot, and that really was a final that, surprisingly, because I was even talking to people up the country afterwards, they're all talking about that final here in the midst of it. And of course, it should be noted as well, like Charlie Cox, like what that family have had to put up with in recent months, and to see him, God, I feel so inferior really, and to see him, like, both in terms of his performances on the pitch, he was a complete leader for them in right through, particularly when the tough got going in extra time and there's bodies cramping up everywhere and dropping, and they've both sets of the starting teams and all the subs that are coming on are giving absolutely everything, but he's the one that stood strongest. But then just to hear him talking about afterwards and acknowledging the difficult circumstances, and his late father passing away in such a horrible situation, and just the timing of it. But to see him just taking it in his stride, it's just, I repeat, I feel so inferior. Like what a young man that is, and credit to his family he is. But yeah, that was kind of one of those moments where you're just going, wow.
Yeah, you could even see some of the leadership, but I was just listening to your interview with him after, like, and some of the things he was saying for a man who's still under 17, like, it really, really stood out. Just before we get in to the games that were over the weekend, are you surprised that Moycullen, Dunmore MacHales and Clifden have all went on to win Connacht titles?
No. Not really, no, to be brutally honest with you. You can tell, particularly Moycullen, the team that I would cover the most. I've pretty much done most of their games over the course of the year now, just the way the games have worked out, shall we say. No, they're an exceptionally well coached setup, like one of the best. You have, everyone talks about, there's big talk about spending now, and backroom managers and everything like that. It's all the rage. They're as good as you get up. A huge overlap really with the Sigerson success. level of detail and the level of coaching and every facet of the game. There's no stone left unturned with them. They're an incredible setup, so well tactically set up and disciplined. You could talk at depth for so many little sides of the game that they're exceptional on, and they literally, I repeat, they leave no stone unturned. So no, I'm not surprised at all with Moycullen going all the way. And I think they're a side that's kind of set up perfectly to this type of winter football as well. They're getting better. They're taking it in their stride. They're hard running, and their game plan, I think the players that they have are well averse to winter football, if you want to call it that. And then just with Dunmore as well, for me, management again have a huge say. And you listen to Gary after both the Galway final and after the victory over Ballyhonus in the semi-final. It's all about these opportunities don't come along. And even after the Connacht finals, as I see, heard him a game away from Croke Park. He's a guy has been around the block with Curfin, obviously, and knows what it takes, and very much isn't resting on their laurels. And while there will be celebrations among all three of the individual clubs, they're very much looking at the bigger prize. They're not going, this is us done now, we can put the feet up. They're all targeted. And the way the way the fixtures go, it's nice. I know that the hurlers, Thomases, are out in a couple of weeks' time, but I think it's the footballers can now have that. I think it's a nice setup. They can have a bit of a celebration, and then they can get their heads down and get ready for the respective semi-finals. So no, to long story short, not surprised really, because all those three sides want the bigger glory and want to and take pride in representing Galway in the I suppose now the national stage.
On Moycullen's victory over Tualastrán on Sunday, 13 points to 6, ran out 7-point victors. At halftime, you might have thought that, but just a point you touched on, and it seems to be being touched on a lot recently, Moycullen, about how well coached of a team there. And I think the most impressive aspect that you could say they're well coached is their discipline. They rarely tend to give away many frees. Even the last day, I think it was only one free inside the 45 or something they gave away.
That was at the end of the game as well.
Yeah. It's just so important, because if you look at it from the other side of things, Desi Keneally gets 4 points from frees. This time of year, it's so vital. That's a stat that is just, it stands out so much.
Yeah, that's twofold really. One, it's the tactical discipline, and you look through Tualastrán, while they were completely over the top, negatively set up. I think I made the point in commentary. Everyone's talking about now with Fergal O'Donnell being in charge that they're not as defensive as they were under Eamon O'Hara. I hope Sundays was a blip, or really something exceptional, because there was a defence as you can get. You can see some of the, John Gillespie had some brilliant Instagram stories from behind the goal there in the first half, and there was one move in particular. I think it led to maybe the third Desi Keneally scores, the one that Adam Bro, the Tualastrán goalkeeper, spilled. But they were in the corner forward position, and it's Owen Kelly, and he just about gets a hand pass away. But literally all you can see is a swarm of yellow around. Eventually they bring it out to, and they recycle across to Peter Cook, who takes a shot from the right wing in front of the stand, and the keeper spills it, but they get a foul and a tap over. That just kind of summed up how defensive. But yeah, you're right. Moycullen didn't get a point from play in the opening half, but those 4 frees were so important, and they were kind of demoralising enough the way for Tualastrán point of view. But if the flip side is Tualastrán, like usually you say when you get all your scores from play, you're doing well. I think it's the opposite really here. They're put under pressure, and they had a couple of some of those scores were maybe high risk shots. You think of a couple of Gottons, one there outside of the left. Kelly's a couple from distance as well. And they struggled in when they didn't have the breeze of their back for the second half. But yeah, such tactical discipline. And for me, really, the key is the squeeze that they put on, the kick out in the second half. You can see it. They all swarmed in front of the stand. They bottled up. And those 2 key phases of the game, really. I think the own Galler point after, 4 minutes so into the second half, give them a bit of impetus, because it was another bit of a moment where it was a similar sort of a phase of play to we've seen so many times in the first half, where they had the possession for long periods. But this time it's Claffey across to Sean Kelly, and then on to Galler on the loop. There's just a bit more urgency on it. and he puts over a bomb of a score with, you know, from the right wing, more difficult than it looks. But then they squeezed up. They got 3 points in a row, and then they got another 3 points in a row, maybe 5 minutes later. That was the real key phase. And there's a couple of moments there. I think there was the Paul Kelly one, and it was the Clark, Cook, and Paul Kelly, 18, 20, 23 minutes. That's the difference, really. And they, you know, they had another period where it was 8, 9, and 9. The Cook from play, Micheál O'Reilly, a fine score from out in front of the stand as well, and then Paul Kelly again quickly. And they had goal chances as well. I think they were very unfortunate with the Paul Kelly one in the first half. Really, I think it was about 2 minutes in, where they did their usual, you know, basketball type move where they won through and cut to the lines, and Paul Kelly tries to you know, palm it in, just doesn't get the contact on it. Jared Davenant very unlucky in the first half as well for the cracked off the crossbar. You had Neil Mackay. This is that Paul Kelly. I think it was Paul Kelly's first point in the second half, where it's Neil Mackay comes through. He kind of drives it at Bro, maybe a bit more direct. Either side is probably a goal, but they had goal scoring opportunities, and that's the key, really. Even, you know, you talk about their discipline, you talk about their work rate, you talk about their tackling, you talk about everything else, but they can bloody score. And I think the Strokestown game was a bit of a blip, but if you look at it, they created an abundance of opportunities in that game as well. They just didn't convert, or couldn't convert for large periods of the second half. Obviously, the Westport performance as well, such a high scoring tally, but they have sharpshooters, and they're just, you know, they're such a good side to watch. You know, you hear some people moaning about the recycling play. I think it's fascinating to watch just how so well disciplined they are. And I was chatting to Peter Cook afterwards, and like, it was one thing I had to mention, because there's so many periods you see Peter Cook with the ball, and it's almost like he's their quarterback at times, particularly in that opening half where they had the, you know, I'm sure if there was a clock on the amount of time they had the ball in hand, it would have been, you know, close to the half an hour mark. But so many times, and you would have saw as well watching Paul, where do you think they're going to go on, drive on, but he just waits back to go and around again, you know, just waiting for that movement, keeping that, you know, low bank defense, move from left to right, turn them out, and then they can get their opportunities in their second half. And look, it's going to be one hell of a battle in the semi-final in the new year. Whoever comes out on Sunday, that is a heavyweight of heavyweight clashes. All-Ireland champions Kilcoo versus a Glen team that has so much to prove, and Conor Glass in exceptional form. And it's going to be a challenge no matter who they play. But like, would you doubt them, particularly if the game is potentially in Croke Park, like the hurling semi-final? You can imagine they're going to thrive there in the big open pitch. And yeah, such a big game to look forward to. But you know, they're celebrating this week, no doubt, before they get back on the pitch, and certainly well deserved.
You talked there about the press, I suppose. What does really help them there, if you consider, like, on that press, like, obviously you have Tom Clark and Peter Cook around the middle, but then you take, for instance, Paul Kelly and kind of float into that role as well around the
Davern as well, as in the
huge
huge
like they're nearly, you could say, 4 natural midfielders, but they help so much to have 4 players of that size and physicality for a press.
Yeah, very much so. And like, you want to take, probably no more than myself, one of the smaller men on the team, Desi Keneally. Not that I would even dream about comparing our football and abilities with each other, but you see his work rate. I know he got black carded against Westport, probably, you know, slagging him afterwards, maybe a bit of the Peter Stringer tackle, but he got a couple of big turnovers in the game there on Sunday also. And when you have the likes of him, you know, working like a dog back and fighting their way back, it's just an intense work rate from top to bottom. And they have, you know, they have the rush defense, if you want to call it that, to take a term from, you know, American football, where, you know, it's kind of coming back, swarming, putting the pressure on. But they have just raw man markers as well. Neil Mackay, fine defender. Conor Corcoran, what a find he's been coming out of Minder. You know, there really are some sticky, you know, defenders back there as well. The half back line, I think we saw, if people didn't realise just how important David Wynne is to that setup, you know, watch the Strokestown game, and, you know, again, slagging him afterwards, 6 on his back, but the amount of times he's overlapping, running down either wings during the period of the game, he's so clever of that kind of the second, third man off the loop. And it was only when I was watching back on the highlights there on Monday night on TG Carr, you watch Peter Cook's last score, 3 minutes into injury time, his third of the game, but just watch the little reverse hand pass from David Wynne. He's running, and he's almost running full throttle, but he just, in one movement, he turns around and flips it behind him, sees Peter Cook behind him, who strokes it over. They're just so talented at that. And they're they're almost a team that can play you no matter what way you want. Gallard then the link man up the middle, but like, you know, Aidan Claffey, I was delighted for him as well that he got his score in the second half there, because maybe not one of the more, you know, high profile players in the team, but in and out of the team for periods there as well. But you know, it was exceptional performance as well.
He's made this year as well.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And you know, even the likes of say King Dean, who wouldn't have played at the weekend. I know he got a bit of an injury in the Strokes on game. He's had a fine campaign as well as another tight, sticky corner back. And they're all comfortable on the football, and they're such a well disciplined setup. And look, we have to see in the new year the likes of James McLaughlin as well. I think we're all hoping from a Maroon perspective as well, if we can get him back in it. But if he
4 weeks now he has to the
semi-finals, what a potential addition he would be as well, like an absolute mountain of a man. Jesus, you see him coming out the tunnel and you nearly need a step ladder even just to say hello to him. Like, he's a huge man, will be such an asset. For both Moycullen and Galway, either, you know, as a kind of a man out the middle or sometimes as a target man, as he likes to be. So, yeah, no, everything is looking good at the moment, and it's good to see Niall Walsh coming back as well. You know, injured and Strokes on game. You know, a big loss for that particular game. I think it's always difficult when you lose a player, you know, right at the death of a game. I know he said he's injury trouble with a groin injury over the course of the year, but good to see him back as well. Another big man, another clever player. And that's the thing about them. They're all so, you know, tactically well disciplined, but they're all fine footballers, but they're also cute and tactically aware on it as well. Look, it will be a big ask to go. Look, you're talking about being in the business end, but you just wouldn't ride against them. And then in Duncanellan, they're as shrewd as a manager as you.
Don Canellan, he obviously would have been involved with the NUIG Sigerson team at the start of the year in some capacity. Manager, obviously, of that NUIG Sigerson team, Maurice Sheridan, he's involved with Moycullen as well as Kevin MacDonald and Paddy Moore. And
Carl Clancy in the background then as well, you know.
They're having a dream year when you think of Sigerson, Frank Fox and Shane McGettigan, and
possibly more.
They obviously believe in that setup now, that Andy Merrigan as well, because why wouldn't they? Yeah,
no, absolutely. Look, as I said, it will be a difficult challenge. Look, you're going to have to beat Kilcoo or Glen, and then most likely Crokes in the final. You'd have to match, with the greatest respect, whether it's O'Rahilly's or Newcastle West to come out of Munster at the weekend. You'd have to imagine that Crokes will have a bit too much, and then we'll start into all sorts of soap operas. With a certain Kilkerran Clonberne man there as well. Like, and like, I think it's a point I made on Monday night on another show on Galway Bay there. Like, I think for me, there's a very strong, credible argument that the two most informed Gaelic footballers at the moment are Sean Kelly and Shane Walsh, two Galway players. So will they mark each other if there was a potential final together? I don't know. It'd certainly be one that would. Talk about club football maybe not getting the fulfilling media desires, if that's the right word, or whatever. That would certainly put that angle to bed, because where do you even start with that one? But it looks a long way to go before that. But in terms of Moycullen, no, you'd have to fancy them, no matter who comes out of Ulster. It'd be a battle, but you'd have to give them absolutely every chance.
Oh yeah, as you mentioned, they're a massive challenge away. 7th or 8th of January, they do play Kilcoo or Glen. Kilcoo or Glen play this weekend, and that's who Moycullen facing the All-Ireland semi-final. Just on a certain Shane Walsh there, it's safe to say he's not dropping his standards from the All-Ireland final performance in Croke Park, like over the weekend. 9 points again, another man of the match award. I suppose like there was so much about this Kilmacud Crokes transfer and everything, but I think as you're into football at all, just to see Shane Walsh still lighting it up in Croke Park around this time of year, you couldn't really have any complaints.
Oh, look, Shane is a Rolls Royce of a footballer, and he is absolutely thriving on the biggest stage. Look, a lot of pressure, a lot of negativity that came with the move. I have to say, I was a little bit taken back with some of the comments. I think people should have known a bit better now in terms of some of the tangents that it went on. But Shane can only do. He's talking on the pitch. Oh my God, has he done that? He's just absolutely thrived on this biggest stage. He's just he's like a duck in water there, really, isn't it? And even, it was always probably thought when he's going that he was going to be like a two-man tag, maybe even perhaps a lesser tag alongside Mannion, the local lad, and the dub, etc. But unfortunately, Mannion got that bad injury, and Shane has just had to pick up the mantle. And what he's done, like it's like he's been there all his life, and people are now starting to see. And look, there's a big difference between playing, intermediate football in Galway, where you might have 2 or 3 defenders hanging off you in a, you won't be probably playing with the greatest respect, and certainly won't be playing in the conditions that of Croke Park. So like, I think from Shane's personal point of view, he's been proved right. I don't know how many times over you want to estimate it or put a value on that, but he's certainly thriving there. It looks like it could be, if we're being selfish, it looks like it could be a good move for Galway football as well, because he's just at the top of his game. And yeah, look, he's just put another unbelievable performance, and he's carried that team ultimately. There's a lot of big players there around, but he's carried them, right the way through. And you saw, like,
there is, though, you'd have to say there is a bit of a scary prospect now for the other teams involved when you consider Paul Mannion could be back in the new year alongside Shane Walsh.
Yeah, like, it's going to be an interesting one with Mannion, isn't it? Now, how much of a value does he put on his club career versus his potential inter-county return? I'd say if it was like any of the year where he didn't have Dublin to come, he's probably going to push himself back and try and be back for the potential final. I think, by all accounts, the little bit I can reading and hearing as well, that the semi-final might be a little bit too close for him, but potentially he could be close to return for the final. But in addition, that would be, even like, if Paul Mannion comes on and doesn't do anything, he's still going to distract you, isn't he, having a player of that quality? And yeah, if there wasn't a Galway team playing against them, you'd be getting excited at the thoughts of that two-man full forward line, or whatever they want to go. Shane, go a bit deeper and probably interchange. Jesus, that's like the Glatigos at Real Madrid all over again, isn't it? But yeah, look, it'll be interesting how the two of them combine. They never really, because Shane kind of came on in that first couple of games where Mannion was there, and then he got injured. So, but you have to say on Shane, like, one thing that probably strikes me is like the Dublin final. He gets a nasty enough stamp on the ear. He comes back with the Terry Butcher kind of head bandage. He's got a couple of, I think, I'm not sure, was it stitches or staples or whatever. He got patched up either way anyways, and on he comes and puts in a monster performance. Maybe there was question marks before by some people. I don't think they were the most credible, set up in terms of not quite his manliness or his physique. No one ever doubted his skill level, but did he have that to come through and pay through the pain barrier? Certainly, if there was any doubts like that, not that there should have been, he's certainly answered that, and what a performance he put in. And he's just continuing that again, and as you say, almost unmarkable at times. And you saw the downs. I know Ratholt and Crokes are we're near the same levels, but they look. I thought the downs looked quite defensively set up strong in that semi-final victory, but like, he just absolutely blew them apart. And it's that kind of, you see him going up through the gears, and he's about 3 or 4 different levels of acceleration. He's just absolutely burning past players, and 9 points. Probably disappointed that he didn't get another goal with that. Maybe a couple have come off the upright as well. So like, the tallies that he's putting up are incredible. And yeah, can you imagine if it is Moycullen versus Crokes in the final? Jesus, who's going to pick him up? So many side stories there, isn't it? It would be incredible.
Yeah, remarkable performances. And just before we do get on to Dunmore and Clifden's victories, I was just reading an article on the 42 before we did come on and record this podcast. It was just Porrick Joyce confirming that obviously Damien Comer is away travelling now, but that he will be back for the 2023 year for the tribesmen. It's massive news because obviously he's so valuable to this team, but you consider already Liam Silk going to New Zealand, Kieran Malloy with cruciate injury, 2 players who were vital cogs of that team last year. But like, if you're to lose a player, Comer's stature and even the leadership he brings, it would be a massive blow. So just such a positive when you consider where Galway football is at the moment, and to have Damien Comer involved for 2023.
Yeah, I don't think anybody that was I suppose, close to it or whatever, or like, I don't think Damien was ever going to go away. I think this is very much just not getting that out at the sim, but going and enjoying himself. And judging by his Instagram stories, he's having quite a ball out there as well. And fair play to him. Jesus, talk about a year that he has put in. But yeah, no, good news, just a confirmation of that. And look, the Galway squad potentially, if everything goes to plan, will be an exciting prospect. I know this isn't any. It's just my own hunch on it. I would imagine it might be difficult to get Silk back from down under. I'd imagine as well. He's probably want to both in terms of his work and I suppose social, have a bit of time himself. I'd imagine that might be a difficult ask. Obviously, Ciara Malloy has the injury, so maybe a bit down defensively. But
yeah, I suppose we actually didn't have a podcast since I suppose a bit of news emerged last week where you have Ian Burke, Barry McHugh, John Mayer, and Evan Murphy joining the squad as well.
Yeah, they've been in for quite some time now, or been lined up to be in some time. So yeah, no, that's good positive news. I think anybody who's watched the club championship would see the potential benefits of those. And you hope that, I have to say, with Ian Burke in particular, you'd hope that how do you put it, that it works out for both parties, because Ian Burke on his day just gives you something completely
Back to his best this year for Griffin.
Yeah, it was like, and without really, I suppose, a full preseason, if you want to call that, under his belt, he kind of came back relatively quickly. But just a phenomenal footballer. Gives you that, as I said, something different. Almost like he's not the most biggest guy in the world, but he's such a target man. He's such a clever little runner, and particularly now with the advanced mark, he wouldn't have had that previously in his Galway career. It gives you something completely different. And I keep going back, and I keep harping back to the All Ireland final, where if there was a frustration, it was just that couple of percentage that we didn't have, and where Kerry were. And hopefully, like, would you see some of the Moycullen players, and Peter Cook in particular, you watch him stroke over scores in the second half. You see the discipline that he has in the football, his intelligence on the football. And I know Cian O'Neill was in there in the stadium as well on Sunday. So you just hope that can be made right for both parties. Barry McHugh as well, like you talk about, a pure raw score, just an absolute point machine. Potentially what he could give you as well, coming on at the potentially, if you're chasing a score or whatever, fine place kicker as well, which is also very, very, very important. But yeah, no, like, and John Maher, I think as well, is totally deserved. Fine campaign for Salted Lochnacara. Gives you another bit of physicality out the middle. Yeah, no, so it's going to be interesting to see. You'd have to say as well, between Sigerson and between the Moycullen players in particular.
Even Dunmore and Clifden players now will be considered.
No, as well. We'll see how much impact or how much the involvement there is. But I think the FBD games that are coming around, that game's coming around quicker as well. That game against Leitrim and potentially Mayo then in the final in the Dome in the new year. You'd imagine that'll be an opportunity as well to be not quite a trial game, but definitely players will be getting opportunities there as well. It's going to be a little bit different in the league as well, isn't it? Being back in Division 1, and the caliber of games are coming thick and fast. But with players like you look at the likes of Sean Kelly, Mother of Jesus, like how many games is that man going to put up? And
yeah,
I don't know. Like, if
good point.
We're at the Super X launch there last week, and you see Sean Kelly, and it's almost like, not you again. I'm seeing you all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've been following Sean all bloody year now in terms of Sigerson FBD league the whole way through, and Moycullen now to add onto it. He's never had a break, and some of the performances that he put in, like he did one turnover there in the second half, and it was just incredible. Like, he was in a turnover it came out of no place in front of the stand. He gets the turnover, reach from behind, then he gets clattered 2 or 3 times, wins a free. It's just a huge moment, and he's doing that all year. His performance against Montpellier Mylott was, just, you don't have the words. You just can't describe how good a performance that was. Westport as well in particular, another outstanding performance. The same against Strokestown. Maybe not at the huge levels, that at the same levels of that against Tourist Round at the weekend, but didn't need to be. Like, he's still an absolute solid player. Again, 3 in his back, but you see him everywhere. I think the GPS, I think if you he must nearly have to go the old caveman and rewind back the clock on it now at this rate, because he's just put in some serious ailment. But joking aside, it is something that will have to be managed. Like, does he play Sigurdsson again? I know he's been named on the provisional squad. You'd nearly say that he needs to get a break somewhere. You
Yeah,
can't have him.
definitely has to.
Like, it's just, you
Doing
just
that
can't
2 years on the straight it's bound to catch up to you at some stage.
Yeah, and like every game that he plays, like he gets battered, his head is stuck in it, he's driving forward, he's getting contact. So yeah, no, there's going to be a couple of challenges like that, but I suppose the fact that he's still involved with his club or whatever can only be a good thing.
On Dunmore then, over the weekend, they had a 116-113 victory over St. Dominic's. You talked there about Gary Delaney's comments earlier on after the match about how they're one game away from Croke Park, but I think massive credit has to go to Dunmore here, because like, it was a daunting route, you could say, when they looked at it at the start of what they were going to have to do to win the Connacht title. First, they had St. Militia Gales, who were very highly rated from Sligo. Got over them, you could say, relatively with no major fuss. Ballyhonest, they were tested and there were serious questions asked, but second half they came out, and like the last day against St. Dominic's, they were really, really tested again. And what you could say, did leave opportunities behind them as well.
Yeah, it sounded like, again, I was catching bits. I was at the Monaghan game. I just saw the highlights and stuff. But from listening around and talking to people that were at it, it sounded like a classic Dunmore game where they just have to make things a little bit more difficult than it should be. It sounded like the completely, inferior team there seemed to be well on top. I think the penalty earlier on seemed to get them motoring along. For me, really, I think that Ballyhonest game stood to them so much, because I don't think you can describe just how doomed they were at halftime in that game. Like, everything was against them. And then they go and concede a goal early in the second half. It's a well talked up Ballyhonest team. Strong again down the middle, wind at their backs. They get that goal early in the second half, and then Dunmore just click into life. They make a couple of tactical changes that work, and they unscramble the pace, and then 8 points in a row in a blistering away in horrible, cold, wet conditions down at MacHale Park. And the belief that gave them, I think, and then that's added as well with Gary. I think you just can't underestimate how important having a player, a manager of that experience has been there, and is clearly so well driven. You talked about outside the club was all year was get back. There was the mockery, it was the laugh of how they screwed up the game against Lettermore in the county final last year, and are they ever going to come back up? There's probably an element of the Mayo jokes to a certain extent starting to kick in. And even like over the course of the campaign, I go back to, I suppose it was a bit of a dead rubber. It was the last group game against Kilconnelly, and they're, I saw them in the first half, and I thought, wow, here we go, they're definitely going to win it out. And then they fall over the line in the second half. And there's been so many periods of their course, the campaign this year, where probably struggled to keep the hour mark going consistently solid. And that was the Ballyhonest game as well. And it sounds like that late goal give them a bit of a scare as well. But again, passed through Dunmore on the way back there from Duggan Park on Saturday evening. They were enjoying themselves. The buses pulling in. What an achievement! And they'll certainly be looking at going all the way now. They won't be happy and just getting Connacht or whatever. They'll want to go on all the way. And they have a very, very, there's some big players down the spine of that team.
I was just about to say there, like, even at the weekend, like, it looked like a real tight tactical battle at half time. But like Brendan Kerr, he's a player who started most of their games all year, and it's probably a difficult situation because he probably didn't want to be a sub, but like, he was a player who really came in and kind of changed that game at the weekend.
Yeah, he's been such an impact off the bench, hasn't he, over the course of the year, whether he started or come on, that impact that he has is huge. Obviously, Reginald and Thomas gets the limelight with the Man of the Match award, but Shane McGrath as well, another quality footballer. Matthew Reginald as well, phenomenal player. The real kind of drive from deep of them, and they, they're strong, they're disciplined, they're fit, they're hungry. And you tick a lot of those boxes this time of year. And I go back to it was something Don Connellan said after the game, afterwards in the tunnel afterwards. He's like, winter football is all about getting the blocks in, and it is. You gotta just do the basics right this time of year, and keep the percentages. And they're so well trained and they're so well coached, and that's just so important in the modern game. Like, it's not gonna be the day of just kicking it along and hoping for the best. You got to be so. Tactics play such a big part in the games now, and the way they're able to kind of win their tactical battles and just see what's going on there with all their management setup as well. I think they're gonna fancy themselves as well. I know that a final Garbally and
Rally and Clonduff.
that's
Interesting dynamic you could have there.
the two Monaghan boys against each other. You talk about like Ulster football is talk about high profile club managers, and Mickey Hart goes back as well. It's the other one there, but the two, Banty versus Malachy, it's just a unique dynamic to it as well, isn't it? Like, it's some big hitters will probably have to put a camera on the sideline there as well, but one to keep an eye out on Saturday evening. And I suppose Dunmore will be watching closely to the tactics book out and taking some notes and analysing it. Such an important part of the watching the modern game now, studying tape, as the Americans would say in American football. But there's that level of detail now at club setups. It really is incredible, and I suppose that's recognised as well by the two names that you see there. Not the days of taking a club team for the laugh, or because you're the father of a couple of players, are long gone. You're seeing high profile names, and no more so than Saturday night there.
Yeah, like, really impressive for Dunmore over the weekend. They definitely believe that they can have a crack at this All-Ireland series as well and get to Croke Park. I was just really impressed with the manner of Clifden's victory as well against St. Ronan's from Roscommon over the weekend. Like, 116 to 10 points. Never really looked at any stage in doubt that they weren't going to get the job done.
Yeah, efficient coker, cold-minded, everything you want really in that setup. And I know, look, the setup with Roscommon there is a little bit strange, isn't it, with St. Ronan's, and maybe there probably wasn't the most strongest opposition in the world for Clifden. But again, another side, and I keep going back to it because there's so many teams that you see they get their first objective, and then they go on the lash, and then that's it, and they're happy enough. And how many times do you see teams come through and play in these provisional? I think, like, I have to say, I was very disappointed with Westport and how they turned up for that kind of the senior semi-final or the quarterfinal even. Like, I don't know, I think they question the logic of some of the decisions that the squad made on, and I think they were clearly happy just to get over the line once. But I think that just shows the difference. All three of the Galway teams have taken this in their stride. They're really, really focused about pushing on and making the most of this opportunity. And I suppose Clifden have a bit of experience as well here, and they're taking it. And again, you can see how much it just means to them, and the pride that they have, and not just resting on their laurels and just putting, if they're talking, maybe you're playing against a weaker opposition or whatever, but just go getting the job done. And by all accounts, that game was wrapped up with relative minimum ease as well. And when you can win
Gibbons as well, he's been fairly picking up the man of the match awards on their route to the final.
Yeah, unbelievable! Like, what a campaign he has had.
As well, like John O'Brien as well, ex-Galway player who's
solid, aren't they?
Yeah, no, like, it's a well solid team, and again, Jonathan, there's no reason why they won't feel that they can't.
Like, you think of all three of the Galway teams there now. I think they're there, and they're very much in the melting pot here and in the business end, and we'll have a big say, even if all three, like, what an achievement it will be for all three of them to be successful. That might be a push, but who knows? We'll certainly hope that that's the situation. But you would certainly have to say that all three will have a big say. Any team that beats them will be doing well, and they'll certainly earn it.
Yeah, they're all really going to feel it's a massive opportunity and an exciting Christmas as well in all of these parishes. But that is all on our show for this evening. Thanks a million to Jonathan for coming on.